Welcome to our channel. Today, you will listen to the inspiring life story of Steve Jobs. A man who changed the world with his ideas, his vision, and his courage. In this story, you will discover how a young boy who was adopted at birth, grew up to build Apple, one of the most powerful companies in history. You will learn about his early struggles, his failures, and how he turned every obstacle into a new beginning. This is not just the story of technology. This is the story of persistence, creativity, and believing in yourself even when the world says no. As you listen, focus on the simple English words and sentences. This is your chance to improve your English listening skills while also finding motivation for your own life. So, sit back, relax, and follow the journey of Steve Jobs. A journey that will remind you that failure is not the end. It is the first step toward greatness. Let's begin. Steve Jobs was born on February 24, 1955, in San Francisco, California. From the very beginning, his life was marked by change. His biological parents were young and unable to care for him, so he was adopted by Paul and Clara Jobs, a modest couple. This detail is important, because Steve often said later that being adopted taught him about identity, belonging, and the power of choosing your own path. Growing up, Steve was curious and sometimes rebellious. He loved to explore, to take things apart, and to see how they worked. His father, Paul, was a mechanic and craftsman. He taught Steve how to build electronics in the family garage. While other children were busy with toys, Steve was fascinated by circuits, wires, and tools. This curiosity for how things worked became the foundation of his future career. But Steve was not the perfect student. He often got bored in class. Teachers said he was difficult, too energetic, and too independent. He preferred learning on his own, following his curiosity rather than the rules of the classroom. This shows us something important: success is not always about following the system. Sometimes, success is about thinking differently. When he was a teenager, Steve lived in the heart of Silicon Valley. This was a place where technology was growing fast. Companies like Hewlett-Packard were starting to build the future. Steve attended lectures there, met engineers, and felt inspired. At 13, he even got a summer job at Hewlett-Packard, where he met another young man who would change his life, Steve Wozniak. Steve Wozniak, often called Woz, was a brilliant engineer who loved building computers just for fun. He and Jobs quickly became friends, even though Wozniak was older. Woz had the technical genius. Jobs had vision, energy, and a natural talent for seeing how technology could connect with people's lives. Together, they would later create something extraordinary. But before that, Jobs took an unusual path. After high school, he went to Reed College in Oregon. However, he quickly realized that formal education was not for him. He dropped out after only 6 months. But instead of leaving completely, he stayed on campus, attending the classes that interested him, like calligraphy. People thought he was wasting time, but years later, Jobs explained that this decision influenced the design of the Macintosh computer, with its beautiful fonts and elegant typography. Sometimes, the things that seem useless in the moment become powerful later. After dropping out, Steve traveled to India, searching for spiritual meaning. He experimented with meditation, simple living, and alternative lifestyles. This experience shaped his philosophy, simplicity, focus, and the belief that intuition is as important as logic. These ideas would later become central to Apple's products. In 1976, Steve Jobs was only 21 years old. He and Steve Wozniak decided to build a computer. They worked in the garage of Jobs' parents. With little money but big dreams, they created the Apple I. Unlike other computers at the time, which were bulky and difficult, the Apple I was simple and user-friendly. They sold 50 units to a local store, and suddenly, they realized they had a real business. Soon after, they built the Apple II. This computer changed everything. It was colorful, accessible, and became one of the first mass-market personal computers. Apple grew quickly, and in just a few years, Jobs and Wozniak went from working in a garage to leading one of the most exciting technology companies in the world. But let's not forget, Steve Jobs did not follow the traditional path. He was adopted. He struggled in school. He dropped out of college. He searched for meaning far from home. Yet, through all of these choices, he followed his curiosity and his passion. That is why Apple was born, not from a perfect plan, but from courage, risk, and vision. The lesson for us is simple. Your beginnings do not define your ending. Even if you feel lost, even if you take an unusual path, you can still create something great. Jobs' early years show us that success comes from curiosity, from friendship, and from the courage to try, even in a small garage with almost nothing. By the early 1980s, Apple was no longer just a garage project. It had become a company worth millions, and Steve Jobs, still in his 20s, was a symbol of innovation and ambition. In 1984, Apple introduced the Macintosh. This was not just another computer. It had a graphical user interface, a mouse, and beautiful design. For the first time, people could interact with a computer in a simple and intuitive way. The Macintosh was revolutionary. But inside Apple, things were not perfect. Jobs was passionate, demanding, and sometimes very difficult to work with. He pushed people to their limits, expecting excellence at every step. Some employees admired him for his vision, while others found him too intense. As the company grew, conflicts also grew. The board of directors and the CEO, John Sculley, disagreed with Jobs' management style. And then, in 1985, something shocking happened. Steve Jobs was forced out of Apple, the very company he had founded. Imagine the pain. At just 30 years old, Jobs lost everything he had built. Many people would have given up. They would have disappeared from the spotlight. But Jobs later said, "It was the best thing that could have ever happened to me." Why? Because failure freed him to start again, to be creative without pressure. After leaving Apple, Jobs founded a new company called Next. It focused on building advanced computers for universities and businesses. Next was not a huge commercial success, but it gave Jobs valuable lessons in leadership, design, and vision. At the same time, Jobs took a bold step in another direction. He bought a small animation studio from George Lucas. That studio was called Pixar. At first, people thought it was a risky move. But Jobs believed in the power of storytelling through technology. He supported the team for years, even when there was little money coming in. In 1995, Pixar released Toy Story, the first feature-length computer-animated film. It was a massive success, both critically and financially. Pixar went on to create classics like Finding Nemo, The Incredibles, and Monsters Incorporated. The little studio Jobs had taken a chance on became a giant in the film industry. So think about this. Steve Jobs was fired from Apple, humiliated in front of the world. But instead of quitting, he built Next, invested in Pixar, and prepared himself for a bigger comeback. This part of his life teaches us a powerful lesson: sometimes, failure is not the end. It is a turning point. It is a chance to grow stronger. Jobs himself once said, "Sometimes life hits you in the head with a brick. Don't lose faith." His years away from Apple were difficult, but they shaped him into a better leader and a more complete person. In 1996, Apple was struggling. The company that Jobs had started was close to bankruptcy. To save itself, Apple decided to buy Next for $400 million. And with that deal, Steve Jobs returned to Apple after more than a decade. The man who had been fired was now back to lead the company again. This is one of the most inspiring comebacks in business history. Jobs came back not with anger, but with a new vision. He was ready to transform Apple once again, this time with the lessons he had learned during his years of failure and rebuilding. The message here is simple: failure is not final. Being rejected or falling down does not mean the story is over. For Steve Jobs, failure was the foundation of his greatest success. And for you, every setback can be the same: a chance to begin again, stronger and wiser. When Steve Jobs returned to Apple in 1997, the company was in deep trouble. Sales were falling, products were confusing, and competitors were winning the market. Many people thought Apple was finished. But Jobs saw an opportunity. He believed Apple could rise again, if it focused on innovation, design, and simplicity. The first step was cleaning house. Jobs reduced Apple's product line, cut unnecessary projects, and put all energy into a few key ideas. In 1998, Apple introduced the iMac. It was colorful, stylish, and easy to use. People loved it. The iMac became a symbol of Apple's new beginning and brought the company back to life. But Jobs was just getting started. He wanted Apple to be more than a computer company. He wanted to create products that blended technology and art, products that people would not only use but also love. In 2001, Apple released the iPod. At that time, people carried CD players or bulky MP3 players. The iPod was small, sleek, and could hold 1,000 songs in your pocket. It changed the music industry forever. With the iTunes Store, Apple gave people an easy way to buy and organize digital music. Jobs once again proved that technology could transform daily life. Then came 2007. Steve Jobs stood on stage and introduced the iPhone. He said it was not just a phone. It was a phone, an iPod, and an internet communicator all in one. Many people doubted it at first. But soon, the iPhone became the most influential product of the 21st century. It changed how we communicate, how we work, and how we live. Today, smartphones are everywhere, and it all started with that moment. After the iPhone, Apple released the App Store, giving developers a platform to create apps that would expand the power of the iPhone. In 2010, Apple launched the iPad, proving once again that Jobs could create entirely new categories of products. What made these products special was not just the technology. It was the philosophy behind them. Jobs believed in simplicity. He believed that less is more. He said, "Design is not just what it looks like and feels like. Design is how it works. This focus on elegance, detail, and user experience became Apple's identity. Jobs was also a master presenter. His product launches were like performances. He spoke with passion, used simple words, and built suspense before revealing new products. Millions of people watched, inspired not just by the devices, but by the vision behind them. This period of Jobs' life shows us that true success is not about avoiding failure. It is about learning from failure and coming back stronger. Remember, this was the same man who had once been fired from Apple. But when he returned, he transformed it into one of the most valuable companies in the world. The lesson here is powerful. Your past mistakes do not define your future. If you keep learning, keep improving, and keep believing in your vision, you can turn even the biggest setbacks into the greatest comebacks. For young people listening today, Steve Jobs' story during these years is a reminder to dream boldly. He did not settle for small improvements. He aimed for revolution. He did not just want to make better computers. He wanted to put a dent in the universe. And in many ways, he did. By the late 2000s, Steve Jobs had become more than a businessman. He was a cultural icon, a symbol of creativity and bold vision. Under his leadership, Apple had released products that defined a generation. The iPod, the iPhone, and the iPad had transformed not only technology but also human behavior. But behind the scenes, Jobs faced a personal battle. In 2003, he was diagnosed with a rare form of pancreatic cancer. At first, he resisted medical treatment, trying alternative methods. But eventually, he underwent surgery. For a time, his health stabilized, and he continued working with his usual passion. Despite his illness, Jobs kept leading Apple with intensity. In 2007, when he introduced the first iPhone, few people knew how sick he really was. He smiled on stage, spoke with confidence, and inspired millions. His ability to focus on his mission, even while fighting disease, showed extraordinary determination. As the years passed, his health worsened. He grew thinner, sometimes appearing frail in public. Yet, he refused to give up. He kept pushing Apple forward, launching new products, guiding his team, and shaping the future of technology. In 2009, Jobs received a liver transplant. He returned to work, but the battle was not over. By 2011, his condition had become critical. On August 24, 2011, he resigned as CEO of Apple, writing, "I have always said that if there ever came a day when I could no longer meet my duties and expectations as Apple's CEO, I would be the first to let you know." Unfortunately, that day has come. Just weeks later, on October 5, 2011, Steve Jobs passed away at the age of 56. The world mourned. People around the globe left flowers and notes at Apple stores. Leaders, artists, and ordinary people spoke of how Jobs' vision had touched their lives. But Steve Jobs' story does not end with his death. His ideas, his products, and his philosophy continue to live on. Every time we use a smartphone, every time we listen to music digitally, every time we open an app, a piece of his vision is with us. Jobs once said, "Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life." These words remain his greatest gift. He encouraged people to follow their heart, to trust their intuition, and to have the courage to be different. He also said, "Stay hungry. Stay foolish." A reminder that no matter how much you achieve, you should never stop learning, never stop dreaming, and never stop daring. For young people today, Jobs' journey is more than a biography. It is a message. A message that even if you are adopted, even if you drop out of college, even if you are rejected or fail, you can still build something extraordinary. What matters is passion, persistence, and the willingness to think differently. His life teaches us that innovation is not just about technology. It is about believing in the impossible, about connecting art and science, about making tools that enrich human life. Steve Jobs showed us that one person with vision can change the world. This was the inspiring life story of Steve Jobs. A boy who was adopted, a young man who failed, a leader who was fired, and yet came back to change the world. His journey reminds us that failure is not the end, but the beginning of something greater. If you enjoyed this story and want to keep improving your English while learning about the lives of great people, subscribe to English Practice Hub. Here, you will find more life stories, daily routines, and motivational lessons, all in slow and simple English. So, do not stop here. Hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell. Every video you watch, every story you listen to, will bring you closer to fluency and closer to your dreams. Thank you for listening. Stay hungry, stay foolish, and never stop believing in yourself.